Hey, I'm Katie and this is Ciara. She's the founder of Unbreakable Training. So to kick off Mental Health Awareness Week, we thought we would open the discussion by starting with Ciara and talking about her experience with mental health. So do you want to start off by giving us a little bit of background about your mental health journey?
Cool, yes. So I was first diagnosed with clinical depression not long after I turned 13. I don't remember specifically why I decided to go to the GP. I think it was led mostly by my mum. We have a lot of history of it in our family, and my behaviour had changed quite a lot. At the time, I was having depressive episodes as opposed to long bouts of depression, and so they ruled at that stage that they didn't think it was necessary for me to be medicated, and I'm actually really pleased about that, to be honest. From there, started having a lot more issues within high school, and that kind of hit its peak at the start of year 10. So that's second form. Trying to think of it for older people watching. Sorry guys, year 10. It's before you hit NCA. Anyway, at the start of year 10, my first boyfriend took his own life, and that that with the pre-existing mental illness really started to throw a lot of things off for me. So a month later, I attempted to take my own life, and then I was referred to quite a few different services, I guess, that are connected to that. So services that serve our at-risk youth. But it was a very interesting process initially. So I went to a unit at Hill Morton, and the first assessment, or the first time that I sat down with a professional there, she said, "I don't think you're grieving, I think you have an anger problem." And so she was like, "I can see you sitting there getting agitated. I can see you." I think I was holding onto the chair or something, and I was tapping my finger. And yeah, I never went back. Obviously it wasn't a great experience. I told my mum, "I'm not going back there. I don't think it's going to be helpful." Throughout high school, I had access, almost unlimited access to the counsellor that they had at Cashmere High. But I couldn't tell you how helpful or not helpful that was.
Mm-hmm.
It was we're talking I was 14 when this happened. So I can't draw that much of concrete memories from it. But I had access to school counsellors for a good chunk, but nothing external to that, because I'd kind of shut that down at that stage. And I just don't really think, I guess, that I was ready. I had a lot of issues at high school. For the most part, my teachers took my behaviour to be me playing up versus expressions of not being in a very good mental state. So I was suspended a few times, and I ended up getting asked to leave the school that I was at, and then I completed level 1 and 2 NCA at another school, but I was purely because I was able to not attend, and I could turn up, get the work, and then leave. And I suppose because of my experience, I felt so different to other kids of my age. And so I just really didn't feel like I belonged in that space. And I felt the same at tertiary level. I did a lot of tertiary study, but I was always somebody who would get the work and leave. I was never part of any of the social events. I never went to a dance or a formal or a end of year whatever celebration, graduation thing, because I was determined to do the work and get the qualifications, but I didn't want to be a part of, I guess, the social aspect. God, I said I told myself I was gonna keep this nice and brief, but it's quite hard to talk about it in enough detail. And it's also a span over a long time. So if you don't know, 28 now, so we're talking kind of 14 years. So high school, tertiary study, had a lot of ups and downs in that time. Experimented with a lot of different forms of escapism, so drugs, alcohol, boys, breaking the law, all of these things that made me feel something else and gave me an opportunity to not think about how I felt. I was incredibly self-destructive, but I would flip between like not caring at all about what happened to me to knowing that I kind of like wanted to do something with my life. I was lucky to have like a few teachers who like really held on because they could see the potential, and there are different people who like, you know, they planted different seeds that kind of like stuck with me and did mean that I didn't like completely leave school, and they did kind of like continue to foster that kind of like passion that I did have to do something, but there were plenty of teachers that just did not have the time for me and just washed their hands. And I was a smart but very defiant person in high school. When I turned 18, I started boxing, and then from there I like really like threw myself into exercise, and in some ways that was like really positive, and in other ways I realized that anything can become a vice. So, you know, whether it's like traditionally healthy or not, or unhealthy, when we put all of ourselves into something, or we start using it as a means of distracting ourselves from how we're feeling, it can then become a negative thing. And so it's really taken, so yeah, I started training a little bit earlier than that, but I got really into it about 18. And it took me until I was about 24, 25 to realize that I am somebody who needs to figure out how to balance things. Because no matter what it is, whether it's exercise, whether it's alcohol, whether it's work, whether it's social media or Netflix, I will zone in on something and I will just completely immerse myself in it to the point that it's no longer something that's positive in my life. I, over that period of time, went to the GP a few times and got set up with the brief intervention counselling. So I've had access to counselling after I was in high school as well. Sometimes it was helpful. Sometimes it was just the action of knowing that I was doing something to make myself feel better. That was helpful in itself. Like knowing that you're like, I am committed to feeling better, and I have decided to do this thing, and that is admirable in itself. When I was pregnant, so all of that was government funded, so I think you get funded for 6 to 8 sessions, but they can decide whether or not they want to extend that. And so I did that sporadically for a few years, and then when I was pregnant, so a few years ago, I decided to pay myself and go privately to see a psychotherapist. And yeah, another very interesting journey and process. And I was just compared to like the angry 14-year-old versus I was 26 at this stage, just so much more prepared to hear what somebody else had to say. And I was ready to hear it. I was ready to like say, I think I do this because of this. And then we had something to work together. And one thing that I've learned particularly since starting the new role that I'm in is that you do have to be ready for speaking to somebody, and you almost have to have a desired outcome, because you can sit there and you can like talk over and over and over all of these different things that have happened in your life, but if you're not able to say like, in this area I do this, but I want to improve the way that I manage that. A lot of the time that's the way, particularly counsellors, and somebody might comment on this and say, this is how different people work in different ways. I know it's all completely different qualifications. So counsellors, to my understanding, they work on the here and now. If you're struggling to get on a bus because of anxiety, we're going to like pull that apart and figure out how you can get on a bus, and I'm going to set you up with some tools to improve that. You know, psychotherapists, I think it's about drawing from past trauma and past experiences a bit more, and they do some of the whatever it is stuff that helps overcome some of that. And then you've got your like psychologists and psychiatrists, which diagnose all of the big stuff and can medicate and and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, been through a few of those different channels. When I was 23, went into Hamilton to be assessed for bipolar, and so I did have a psychiatrist at that stage and a counsellor that was attached to that. So that was, again, like an interesting process that I went through, something that I learned about. I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar. They said I definitely fit kind of into that manic depressive box, but not to the extreme that they would give it that diagnosis. So yeah, there have been different periods in my life where I've gone not feeling that great, and I need more than what I can provide myself to overcome that. And then there have been periods of my life where I've gone, I'm pretty sure I just need to like sleep better and stop being an asshole. So it has been one hell of a journey, but without any of those pieces, I also wouldn't have like had all of these tools that I now have in my toolbox that now help me when I am not feeling that great.
Like comparing your 26-year-old self to your 14, what would you say to your 14-year-old self, having learned everything that you had along the way?
I often think about this because I work with not quite 14-year-olds, but I work with 17-year-olds now, and I wish that I wish that I'd taken up everything that is available for youth, and more so now. There are so many services, and there are so many like different wraparound things that are available for our at-risk youth, in particularly around education and everything like that. But I would say there are actually quite a lot of people who are trying to help you, and they are wiser than you. And whilst you don't necessarily want to listen to that, and you have this like lone wolf kind of like persona that you've developed because of that trauma, I would have overcome a lot of these things a lot sooner, I think, if I had have been prepared to hear what people said. But I just put the walls up, and I was just very stubborn and very sassy.
Sounds about right as a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, teenagers are notoriously stubborn, right? We're trying to figure out who we are. We're trying to figure out what's important to us. Like, and this is something that I can look back on now, and I can give myself. I'm not angry at myself for that, you know. Like, I know that I was a child who was going through development and who was progressing into an adolescence, and it just something horrendous happened right at that time. And yeah, I can give myself the space to heal from that instead of being like, why did you not just listen to people?
So you said like a lot that you had access to services, not so much that you went, but it was more the term that you had access. I guess pushing on from that, were there any turning points, whether it was having access to those services or the people around you, that I guess were in your mental wellness journey?
So I definitely had a little bit of a light bulb moment. I think I was 18, 19, I was flatting. I was working full-time and studying full-time, I think, at the same time. And I would quite often have days where I would wake up in the morning to go to work, and I would have no reason other than my brain would just go, I don't want to go to work today. I just don't want to go to work today. And it was too easy. I would text them and say, I've got a migraine, or I've got this, and you know how it is. We come up with all of these like physical illnesses because it's easier than saying like, I need a mental health day. But it was on one of these days where I've said, no, I can't make it into work today. And I did not move from my bed the entire day. And the longer I was there, the worse that I felt. And I just like fell deeper and deeper into this spiral of fear, feeling horrendous. And I just had this like epiphany moment where I was like, there are some things about me, there are some values that I have that are really important to me, and they revolve around who I am. And one of those things is work ethic. Like, I really want to be known as somebody who has a good work ethic, and I've inherited that. It's my dad's trait. I can blame him for that. But I really, that's something that I really valued. And so I realized that whenever I acted against that, and wherever I didn't have good work ethic, or wherever I let people down, it would make me feel so much worse than if I had have gotten up and gone into work and done it. And that kind of just like summed up everything for me. You know, like if we have a picture of who we want to be, but we do things continually that move us away from that, we're going to feel worse and worse. And the worse we feel, the more we're going to act destructively, and and so on. And it's the same in reverse. When we take on hard things, or when we show up when we know that we really didn't want to show up, that enforces that that you have those values, and it enforces that you're moving towards that, you're being that person that you want to be, and that makes you feel like more and more proud of yourself. And that kind of is one of actually the things that I like took on then becoming a trainer eventually, is like when you take on hard things and when you do something that like you really want to do but it's like really hard to do it and it's terrifying, you actually feel like a superstar afterwards. You know, like I see pride as the opposite of hopelessness and shame and all of those like destructive things that pull us into that void when we're not in a good headspace.
Did you find, and it kind of ties in I guess to people wanting to come in and train and then we refer them to group training, does it help as a trainer knowing that you are showing up to work because you're showing up for someone else?
Yeah, it did a little bit. There were definitely, like I had a really depressive episode just after, so I got into the bodybuilding scene for a bit, and just after I'd had a show, it was the only time I developed any kind of body image issues and any kind of issues with food, is when I was in the best shape of my life, which is very interesting, tells you a lot. But yeah, for the week post that, I ate everything in sight. I put on about 7 kgs in 1 week, and half of it was water, but it was crazy. It was all up around my neck, and I couldn't face my clients at that point. But absolutely, and that's why a lot of people with mental illnesses or fluctuating mental health, I think, get into service industries, because sometimes having that external motivator is all we need, and having somebody else to serve gets us up, gets us out of bed, gets us moving, and then we're like, oh, I like this, I feel good. It feels good having a purpose. So definitely sometimes.
Cool. Little accomplishment.
That's it.
What do you feel helped your mental wellness the most?
I think that it was definitely like related to kind of like that light bulb moment and realizing how much of a part that I played in it. So
going back to that purpose a little bit again,
that and the destructive behavior. I gave up drinking just after I turned 18. I think it was just not long after I turned 18. I gave up drinking for a boxing fight, and it was for 3 months. And all of my friends, I was only friends with them because we drank together.
I was going to say, how is that? Because being 18, I can't remember, it was like, we can finally literally go.
I mean, I had been a big drinker for a few years prior to that. But this was, we'd started going to the pub, and I was a like Wednesday to Sunday drinker, you know, like I didn't have very many nights that I wasn't drinking. So this was a massive thing, and people started pulling the, we miss the old Ciara, and like all of that story, and that's like full on as a 18-year-old, like you're pretty impressionable. I mean, I was stubborn as hell still at 18, which is how I did it. But yeah, it started making me realize that it was the alcohol that was making me feel so much worse. You know, like waking up with a hangover and you're depressed. Like that's just a double whammy, and you're not getting enough sleep and you're not eating very well. And so every weekend I was miserable, and then the only thing that I would then go and do was wake up and decide, when are we going to start drinking again? And so it was this like cycle that I just didn't even recognize was contributing to my poor mental health, and didn't realize like how much I'd like built all of these people around me that were a very positive influence. either.
And it's hard when you're trying to make a change for yourself. I've had those comments thrown at me like, oh, we miss the old you, and it's like, well, shit, I'm actually feeling pretty good, but should I not?
Yeah, and I had to try and explain that, and I've had to try and explain that probably for the following 5 years, because you can imagine, like, at 18, like, a lot of my friend groups were just, like you said, like, they're just starting drinking, and I'm pulling away being like, oh, I actually think I'm a really bad drug. I actually end up getting either really upset or really angry, or I do things that are stupid, and then I wake up the next morning and I'm mortified, and then I feel worse about myself, and then I drink more, and then, you know, again, it's just this thing that, like, continues and continues over and over. So that was really interesting, and it took a lot of, like, there were a lot of relapses after that, you know, like, there were a lot of times where I tried to learn how to drink socially again, and I would just go to town, and do something stupid. And there were a few times I slept with a friend of mine's friend, and he was a little bit, he was in love with me, I guess, and he was really upset that I'd slept with him. And he'd been one of the main people who'd been like, we miss the old you, like, you're not fun anymore, all of this. And I was like, this is exactly it. I was like, I go and do these stupid things, I sever friendships, I do this, like, really self-destructive stuff that I regret, because of the booze, and because I haven't got that control, because I am often trying to escape feeling a certain way. And so, yeah, there was a lot of, like, I like to think that I learn a lot of things by trial and error. So I compare it to, like, I kind of, like, bang my head against a wall quite a few times before I'm like, oh, okay, this is how I get around it. Oh, there's a door.
That reinforcement behavior, you just need it.
Yeah, and luckily, touch wood, nothing horrendous happened. But yeah, it took me a while to go, you'd cause this. You know, you are the captain of your ship, and if you choose to do these things make you feel worse. You know this by now. You've done this for 10 years or something at that stage, once I had about 24, 25. You know that if you keep doing that, it makes you feel rubbish, whereas if you do this group of behaviours, it makes you feel good. And so that was as simple as it needed to be. And whenever I start to feel that things are slipping, I just assess my priorities again, and I go, you've said that this is important to you. Is the way that you're living and acting and spending money and spending time actually reflective of that? Or do these need to change? Like, sometimes you go, I thought that thing was important, it's not really that important. But these things, they are, and I have to make sure that the way I'm living my life is reflective of that, and then I feel really good in who I am.
That's so cool how you were so not reflective, I just said what you said, that's why. How you were so self-aware though from such a young age, because I know, like, even as a teenager, it's so hard, even as a young adult, to be honest, which I kind of still am, it's hard to just accept responsibility when you know you've done wrong, but also to be self-aware and be like, oh, I did this because of X, Y, and Z. This needs to change.
Yeah, and that was, part of that was luck, and part of that was consuming the right media to a certain degree. Like, it didn't take me long until I was, like, really interested in like self-help books and, like, really onto it, businessmen and all of that sort of thing, and I consumed that information like crazy, because I was committed to getting better, and because I could see as soon as I realized how much it was how much my mental health was hinged on becoming a better person, I guess, then I was really committed to that. I guess it's that whole stubbornness, and, like, anything I do at like 100 miles an hour. And
so did you headhunt all of that stuff yourself, or were you kind of steered in the right direction by anyone?
I think for the most part, I had a few friends. I had one friend who we met by chance. He was a photographer, and he had a huge interest himself in human development and psychology, and he found me very interesting, because I was, as you would, I think we met when I was about 16, and he was like, you're really bright and charismatic and quite, quite easy to get along with, but then you go and do this really stupid shit, and you date these, like, moronic, like, criminal boys, and you know, do all of these things. And he's like, I don't know how this lines up. And so he found me really interesting, and obviously, yeah, it all came back to like I had this traumatic thing, and it did kind of like input. Oh no.
Sorry, we completely forgot we had a meeting. Zane.
So he'd been very interested in psychology and human development, and he, I guess, took it on his mission to very gently start pulling apart some stuff, and he became my sounding board for the good part, of 10 years. So we're still really good friends now, but I need him a lot less. But that was a pivotal point of being like, I feel all these things about this thing, because I used to fly off the handle about all sorts of stuff, and I would quite often just go and act on that, you know. And he gave me the opportunity to really pull it apart and then and talk it through and talk about why did I do this like this. So he definitely taught me some of that self-awareness and reflectiveness, for sure. Yes.
So what was a misconception you had about mental wellness?
I saw it as once you're fixed, that's it. So I was very, it's a chaotic time in my teens and early 20s. And then I would hit periods of things were pretty good. And this all kind of like coincided with that period of getting into the bodybuilding and that sort of thing. So I'd started working for myself. That was going pretty good, all of that. And I just, there was no part of me that thought that I could then experience a fall from grace, you know. I'd overcome all this stuff. I was feeling awesome. I traveled by myself, like all of this. And yeah, I did this bodybuilding competition and was just utterly miserable. Just crashed back down again. Again, found something else, got involved in a different sport, thought, yeah, this is it. I found the thing that I need now. And then it just kept happening. And I was like, oh, this is something that I'm going to have to manage forever now. This isn't just I'm going to get to a point where like, no matter what, I'm good, you know? And so that was another kind of like realization that I made was this is something that you have to work on and maintain forever on an ongoing basis. And there is always going to be times that things go a little bit backwards, things are good, things are stagnant. So yeah, that was a learning for me.
If there was a misconception you could change about mental wellness, what would it be?
It's in that we are very happy to accept it when it looks a certain way. So when it's, you know, the broken, quiet, reserved person who is just like sitting in bed crying, we feel sorry for those people. But when it's the drug addict or the criminal or the beneficiary, you know, the person who broke into somebody's house on Christmas and stole the kids' presents, you know, so that they could get some meth. Those are the situations where people completely turn on people. They're not prepared to say that this has anything to do with that person's mental health or the fact that they haven't actually been looked after and delivered, you know, provided for, and instead that they're a bad person. You know, we're willing to create a lot of space and you know, a lot of time for mental health when it looks a certain way, and also when it doesn't personally affect us. So it's like your friend who, you know, goes off the grid a bit and stops contacting you and stops, you know, making an effort. And most people make that about them. You know, oh, they're a shit friend now, and realize I've said shit a few times, but it's all right. We can say shit on the internet, right? Realize that, you know, they've turned into a rubbish friend, and how dare they? And they make it all about that instead of thinking, is there something else? Is there something a bit deeper going on there? And that's a big issue, I think. Is we've started saying that we are reducing the stigma and we're, you know, committed to changing mental health in New Zealand, but only when it's convenient for us and it's packaged in this nice, easy way. We don't want to deal with bad kids still, and we don't want to deal with criminals and drug addicts and the like.
Yeah. Oh, I've lost my voice. That's such a good point, and I don't think I could have said it better.
Cool.
I was going to drag out some more, but I don't know if we have time.
No, we'll probably leave it for now. But thanks for sitting through that. We'd intended on trying to bust this out in 10 minutes. Obviously, I have far too much to say. Probably could have been 2 hours. But hopefully it's a good start to our Mental Health Awareness Week.
Cool. We will attach some links to any information down the bottom if you want to reach out to any services, or you just want to know what's out there. We will leave it down the bottom.